Welcome to Withum Sounding Board, a podcast sharing powerful business tips, insights, and trends for those seeking to become a rock star in their industry.
Good day, and welcome to Withum's Lodging Insights and Innovations podcast. My name is Lena Combs, and I'm a partner here at Withum and the practice leader of the firm's hospitality services team. Today, I have with me Zach Smith, who's a senior manager in Withum's Forensic and Valuation Services team, and the national practice leader for real estate valuation for Withum. Today, we'll be talking about real estate valuations for hospitality and lodging companies and the current trends in the market. Thank you, Zach, for joining us today and taking time to talk to us about this topic and providing your insights to the lodging industry.
Thank you for having me.
Great. All right. Well, let's get started. So, Zach, just by way of introduction, what are some of the reasons we might have to think about performing a valuation or an appraisal of a hotel company?
Sure. So, as an accounting firm, a lot of the reasons we see coming through the door have to do with estates and gifting or succession planning, family members trying to figure out what their strategy is for optimizing their estate. So we do a lot of work on retrospective valuations, and some of the other things are maybe sometimes there may be multiple pieces to a business, and we might have to value something for sales and marketing purposes. In some cases, they might have seven different entities, and they might want to say, okay, what's the value of each one? Because we might want to sell off one or more of these. Some of the less common ones are litigation or cost segregation. If you're trying to do a cost segregation study to reduce your tax burden, then you can't really do a cost seg without a real estate valuation as well.
Okay. And what about, I've been hearing tangentially just with some of what's going on in the market about real estate tax valuation adjustments. Is this the kind of thing that a business owner or company could use to help with that process?
Yes. So over the last few years, there have been there's been a lot of activity in the real estate tax assessment challenge area. The market's been very volatile, and especially because those valuations are usually retrospective. Even if you got the valuation today in New York, for example, you're looking at the previous year's value. So through COVID, a lot of regions, the value was depressed. And so tax assessment challenges have been big in the hospitality industry, as well as other sectors of the market. So that's one of those uses I would drop under the litigation bucket, because in some states like New Jersey, if the value of a property exceeds a certain threshold, it automatically goes to court rather than a grievance hearing, for example.
Okay. And of course, each state's rules are going to vary,
Yes.
Right?
The rules in every state are different.
So, Zach, what trends have you seen in the market, or are you seeing in the market now, that are impacting valuations in the hospitality space?
Over the last few years, there's been a trend away from business travel centered hotels towards more leisure centered hotels. So these trends are very different depending upon the geographic region you're looking at. So, a hotel in Savannah, Georgia, for example, Savannah is one of the higher performing hospitality markets in the country. That's a leisure market, and that's a market that's been booming. Whereas a lot of the bigger metropolitan areas, the center cities, those hotels tend to suffer. So in New York, for example, there's been a lot of, we've done a number of projects where you had hotels converted to shelters or hotels converted to apartments. Now, of course, there's more of a contraction in the supply, and in some markets you're seeing record occupancy, partially because there's no limited construction in the past. Moving forward, you would expect that the construction pipeline is expanding now. So over the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of that historic contraction in the pipeline be relieved as more projects are coming online and in the planning process.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about the construction pipeline. Have the increased interest rates had an effect on that?
Yes. So one of the trends we've seen in construction is even though construction is expanding now, there's also a record number of conversions. So over the last several years, you had conversions away from hotels. Now you're seeing you have conversions to hotels or renovations of older hotels to modern standards. So because of the high interest rates and high material costs, there is a marked trend towards those renovation projects, which are less costly than ground up construction. The types of properties we see in the pipeline over the last couple of years, it has been largely in the upscale market, and the construction projects that are in the pipeline now are starting to be pushed downward into the mid-scale economy range. So over the next couple of years, the class of hotels that are expected to be coming online is also changing.
How does that affect the valuations? I'm not even sure if that's a fair question, but like as the market changes and the types of hotels that we're looking at in the pipeline changes, does that have an effect on the valuations in the other, classes of properties that you were just describing?
Sure, that tends to have more of an impact on the occupancy rates and the average daily rates. So if you're bringing a mid-scale hotel online right next door to an upper mid-scale hotel, in the short term, you're going to be taking occupancy away from the hotel next door, right? So that does change the dynamics a little bit. Now, if you're a luxury hotel and an economy hotel, you're probably not playing in the same market. But if you're just one or two classes apart of mid-scale or upper mid-scale, those will tend to cannibalize the market share. So that is one of those things that you do have to pay attention to, the supply and demand and what's in the pipeline in a particular region when you're looking to value a hotel.
Okay, good. So when we talk about the pandemic, and we've talked about, of course, the effect on business travel markets and that you mentioned earlier, what are some of the residual effects that we're seeing in the hospitality market?
Yes. So again, those are largely the supply chain issues, which drove the material costs up, have had a marked impact on the type of construction being done. Again, going back to the trend towards conversions instead of ground up construction. Interest rates are a legacy, but also as an accounting firm, we do a lot of retrospective work, litigation. And so when you're looking at a retrospective date, if you're looking at a property that a value in 2021, you really have to pay attention to how the market was behaving in that place and at that time. So like I mentioned earlier, in Savannah, Georgia, by mid-2021, the hotels in that market had achieved stabilized pre-COVID average daily rates, occupancy, whole nine yards. You go to a center city in the north, and I interviewed a GM at a hotel in New York who said about that time they were still at the 15% occupancy rate. So in our business as an accounting firm, those retrospective analyses are very sensitive to what was going on in the market due to COVID at various times.
Great. Well, thank you. That was very interesting. Hopefully, our listeners have learned something and know where to go if they need to have these kinds of services performed. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. If you have any questions about today's podcast, please reach out to us at www.withum.com/hospitality.